Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to talk about purchasing tips and tricks. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to put them in the Q&A window if you have one. If you don't have a Q&A window, then you can put it in the chat window. Hopefully you do have a Q&A. But at the end of the presentation, I will answer all of your questions. So good morning and welcome. My name is Gina Thomas. I'm the training manager at C&K Systems and your hostess for Training Bytes, a digestible approach to counterpoint training. Joining me today, as always, is Marty Katz, one of our project leads here at C&K Systems. So he's also on hand to answer questions or get me out of trouble if I get into technical difficulties, and I appreciate him.
Thank you, Gina.
You're welcome. So for those of you that do use purchasing documents and you build purchase request, you know how clunky it can be going into the item lookup on a purchasing document and adding your items one at a time. There's no bulk add. It's literally one at a time. I know some of you run a sales report to figure out what you sold in a time period, and then you manually build a purchase request based on the sales report. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a lot of clicking and a lot of work. If you're multi-store, you probably order for each store one at a time. And again, nothing wrong with that, but it's very time consuming. And then once the merchandise, if you're sending it to the warehouse, let's say you just order for all your stores and send it to the warehouse and plan distribution later, that can make distribution planning, again, very time consuming. So today I'm going to show you some purchasing tips and tricks. I'm going to show you how to bulk add items to your purchasing documents, and that can be based on sales even. I'm going to show you this great report called Purchasing Advice, which has some super values. It's not a lot of reports in Counterpoint that will show you unit cost, unit retail, on hand, sold, extended cost, extended retail. That's all in Purchasing Advice. And with Purchasing Advice, you can also automatically generate your purchasing documents instead of manually building them. So very, very nice feature. And for those of you that have more than one store, I'm also going to show you how to do multi-store purchasing. So one document where you're ordering for all stores. Again, huge time saver, much more efficient. So on the Lines tab of a purchasing request, I don't know if you've ever noticed this. A lot of people just don't notice it, but there's this really cool button at the bottom called Add Items. And when you click on that button, you go to what I call the magic window. And within the magic window, you can see all items the vendor carries instead of seeing your entire inventory. You would just see items from that vendor. You can also order based on your reorder points, min-max. You can order based on sales. So very nice window with a lot of flexibility. Another thing that you can do in the magic window is if you are ordering based on sales, then you can have Counterpoint factor in items that are currently on a purchase request or on a PO or have a current on-hand value so that Counterpoint won't over-suggest what you should order. Another feature in the magic window, if you have gridded items or multiple locations, you can view a list of your inventory at the color size level and at the location level, which is pretty nice. And I'll show you that later. When you go to the next tab after you've filtered, you've set your criteria for what you want Counterpoint to suggest. On the Select Items tab, you can select the items you want to order and then specify a quantity you want to order. And if Counterpoint suggests something that you don't like, you can change it. And then when you're done, you add lines and close to return to the purchase request. The purchasing advice report has the same features as add items. The difference is that when you're in add items on the purchase request itself, you're only looking at one vendor. In purchasing advice, Counterpoint will look at all your vendors, and you'll have those same choices of, do I want to order based on my sales, or do I want to order based on my reorder points, my min-max? Then at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice this generate button. So Counterpoint, you'll preview the report. Counterpoint will say, this is what you should order based on your sales or your reorder points. Then generate will build the purchase request for you in an unposted state, which is good because you may not agree with everything on this report and what Counterpoint is suggesting you order. In multi-store purchasing, there's two methods to this. So if you have more than one store, Counterpoint uses the word allocated. Now that's fancy for I'm ordering for more than one store. So on the Ship To tab of a purchase request, you can select allocated, and then your choices are separate or merged. So I have the wrong word here. This is allocated, it should say merged. An allocated separate, one document ordering for multiple stores, but all the merchandise is going to ship from the vendor directly to the individual stores. Allocated merged means one document ordering for multiple stores. Everything's going to ship to one location, like my warehouse or my main store. And then distribution will happen at the point of receiving against the allocated merged PO. This is a nice feature. So when you receive against an allocated merged, Counterpoint will auto-generate transfer outs in an unposted state, which is good because you might want to make changes, but they're already built for you. You don't have to build them manually. Okay, so I'm going to exit the PowerPoint presentation and we're going to go into the software and take a look at a few things. So for purchasing request, you start in purchasing. You go to purchase request and purchase request enter. You start with giving the purchase request some type of number, whether you make them up or whether you auto assign, either one is fine. So here's a tip that I don't know if you've ever noticed before, but once you put a number in the purchase request number field, this copy PO button lights up. So if you go into this button, you'll see all your POs from the dawn of time. So you can copy from an old PO. So what's great about this? Well, you're the type of business that you order certain items over and over, your chapstick, your sunscreen, drinks, water, soda, whatever the case may be. And you order that once a week or once every couple of weeks. You can actually copy from one of those POs, which is a very nice feature. And here's something else that's really nice. If you're copying from a PO that's a little bit older, where maybe your costs have changed in between the time you originally created it and now, Counterpoint's going to take your current cost, not the cost from the PO you're copying. So that's a very nice feature. The only limitation to copy from PO is it will not copy allocated POs, just your straight single store POs. And then once you select that PO that you want to copy from, you can always go to lines and you can always change quantities, add items, delete items, whatever you like. Okay, so that's your first tip, how to copy from an old PO. So I'm going to go ahead and just start one. Now, when I signed into Counterpoint, I signed into my main work group. So if you can visualize when you're first signing into Counterpoint, put in your name, your password, and at the bottom it has this thing called work group. So a benefit of signing into the work group that you're going to order for is that your purchase request will default to that work group's location. So I'm just going to show you on Ship To. I signed into my main work group. So when I do a purchasing document, it defaults to main. It's just one less thing you have to remember to change. Now, let's say I sign into the main work group, but I'm really ordering for another store. You can go into this lookup and change it, but you have to remember to do that. So now I'm going to come to lines here. So really the most way I see people creating their purchasing documents is to go into this lookup here. And this lookup is not smart. You've probably noticed that. So even though I'm saying up here, I'm ordering from Adams, in this lookup, I'm going to see my entire inventory, not just Adams. So I can either, keyword search for something, or I can come here to the filter and just filter for Adams, on this primary vendor line. But again, I can't bulk select. I can only select one item at a time. So I'm going to select this mini backpack just so you can see some messages that I'm going to get that you might encounter so you know what they mean. So I'm going to click OK. So this message is somebody marked the item record as the status discontinued for this item. Do you want to order it anyway? And you can say yes and still order a discontinued item. If it says inactive, you will not be able to place that inactive item on a purchasing document. Discontinued, yes. Inactive, no. Now, this next message you've probably seen, and it's kind of nonsensical. It's not very self-explanatory. No vendor item record. What that means is you're selecting an item where the primary vendor is not Adams. So I'm doing this purchase request for Adams, and this item does not belong to Adams. But maybe the vendor it belongs to isn't giving me such a great price. Adams is giving me a better price. So you can say okay to this, and you can order it anyway. That's fine. Now I want to show you a little trick about gridded items for those of you that use gridded items. So here I have a gridded item. And when you select a gridded item, you get this matrix that pops up. And most people come in here and they say, I want this many of each color and size, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But there's also a nice little feature in here where you can have Counterpoint tell you what you should order for this item based on sales for this one item. So if you look to the top half of the screen, you've probably noticed it's all grayed out and you're wondering, gee, why is this here? If you use this drop down and select replenishment, which is fancy for tell me what I should buy for this item based on my sales. So you click on replenishment. And this is just warning you that, any values you might already have here are going to get cleared out. That's fine. Then over to the right, you want Counterpoint to suggest, so you don't have to manually put in the numbers. And then down here, the date range for this item that you want Counterpoint to analyze to suggest to you what you should order based on sales. So I'm just going to come over here to suggested quantity. I get another warning. So you could see here, Counterpoint is suggesting these quantities because they sold in this date range. If you look to the left, there's some other switches to have Counterpoint take into account if this one item may be on other purchasing documents. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But I'm going to go ahead and order this item. And then I'm going to post the document. So when you select a gridded item to order using the manual lookup, it's considered a consolidated line. In other words, you just see the style. You don't see all colors and sizes associated with it on this screen unless you come down here to the check mark and take a look. Now I'm going to go ahead and post. And then I'm going to let you look at the form. So when it comes to gridded items using this method on your purchase order, the items you order are in a matrix format. Okay. let's get a little fancier now. So I'm going to go ahead and select my vendor. It's still going to be a single store document, but now I'm going to show you the add items window, that magic window. So I'm going to click on add items. Now Counterpoint wants me to save my work so far, so of course I'm going to say yes. And then we come to this new window. Notice there's two tabs, set filter. This is where we set our criteria. And there's select items. This is where we see a list of items based on the criteria on the set filter tab. Now the default for this window looks like this. The only thing that is checked is prime vendors only, meaning only show me items that I get from Adams. And the suggested quantity calculation method is none. If you leave add items at the default, when you go to select items, you're basically asking Counterpoint to show you everything in your inventory that you carry from Adams. So you don't see your whole inventory, only items from Adams. So if I go to select items, I get a warning. Oh, this vendor might be really large, might carry a lot of verticals. I'm really going to show you everything. And so there's everything in the inventory that I have from Adams. Now my top item is a gridded item. So in order to order anything, gridded or flat, gridded or normal, I have to select it. And if it's gridded, I have to come in here and say how many I want for each color and size. If it's just a flat item, you know it's not gridded, then you just select it, and then you come down here to the quantity field, and you put in a quantity. And then when you're done, add lines and close will return you to the purchase request with these items. But before we do that, I'm going to show you a couple of other things. This switch here means if the item you're going to show me is already on this purchase request, show it to me again. If the item you're going to show me is a gridded item, please display it at the color and size level. And then down here in this box called items, if this is a vendor that you purchase a lot of different verticals from, maybe you purchase apparel and golf items, and you only want to do the purchasing document for your golf items, you can come into this lookup and choose a category. If what you want to filter for is not here, because this is what's here by default, maybe you want to filter by subcategory. You can customize this filter. Just right click, customize, then add your subcategory. Make sure to simplify and populate it. So now watch what happens when I go to select items. Show me a list of my inventory from Adams. And if it's a gridded item, break it down to the color and size level. So I'm going to go to select items. I get the warning again because I didn't filter for anything. So you can see here that this style 1004 is being broken down into colors and sizes. Now I had to add this column. It's not here by default. So if you want to see this, you need to right click on a column, go down to your column designer, find cell description under hidden columns, and then move it over to visible. And remember, like any column designer, anywhere in Counterpoint, that's temporary unless you save it. So if you add that column and you want it to be permanent, you need to right click, save as, and save it as the default. And you'll get an overwrite message, just say yes to it. Now in this method, I still have to select what I want and how many I want down here in the quantity. But I don't have to go into that matrix for my gridded item, which is kind of nice. So I'm just going to select a few of these and put in a quantity. Now when I'm done, I'm going to add lines and close. It's going to add these lines to my purchase request, but it's going to ask me a question. So I'm going to add lines and close. Here's the question. You only get this for gridded items, by the way, in the add items. What this is saying is, when I return you back to the purchase request, do you want to see this line consolidated, just the style on the purchase request? Or do you still want it broken down at the color and size level? Now, we've already seen what consolidated looks like. It prints in a gridded format on your purchase order, and you have to access the matrix to see how many you ordered on the purchase request. I'm going to say no to this. I don't want to consolidate. So you could see here, it added the items at the color and size level. And again, I added this column called cell description just so I could see what color and size I'm ordering on this screen. Now I'm going to post this. I'm going to show you what it looks like on the PO form when you do not consolidate your grids. This is probably the only question you answer in Counterpoint that dictates how something is going to print. So you can see here, it's just, it's not in that grid format. So good to know. Well, let's talk about some more fun things. So I'm just going to start another purchasing document. I'm going to come back to lines, add items. When you start changing switches on the magic window, they do become the new default. So you can see because I enabled these 3 switches, they stayed enabled. Now let's come over here to the right-hand side of the screen. So set to none, we're just getting a list of everything this vendor owns. If I use this dropdown, I can choose to order to maximum, which means look at my reorder points and tell me what I should buy. This set order quantity to, I like Counterpoint to suggest a quantity for me. When it comes to min-max, this is how Counterpoint views it. Oh, so you want me to analyze all your min-max levels for atoms. So what Counterpoint's going to do is it's going to look at your minimum and your quantity available. So remember, you have a quantity on hand, quantity available. If your available is below the minimum, then Counterpoint's going to suggest you order to the maximum. So I'm going to go to select items. Again, I get the message about this is a really large vendor. So here Counterpoint's only suggesting one item because this is the only item I have with a min-max value. And if you look over to the right, I added a min-max column because it's not here by default. Again, right-click column designer. So you can see my min is 28, but my current on hand is 10. My available is 8. So when your available is below the min, Counterpoint wants to order to the max. So in this case, 30. 30 is my max. So Counterpoint's going to suggest 22. Now I can disagree with that. I can say, well, I'm going to have a really big sale on this. I want to order 30. You just come down and change it. That's fine. I'm going to go back to set filter. These 3 switches down here, if I already have this on a purchase request that's not posted, then change the calculation, change how many you're going to suggest I order. So if you were going to suggest 22 and there's one on a purchase request, now Counterpoint's only going to suggest 21. The same with open POs. If Counterpoint were going to suggest 22 and you had one on a purchase request, one on a PO, then Counterpoint's going to suggest 20. I don't know of a lot of people using vendor minimums. I think they're kind of handy. This is something you can establish at the item level that says, anytime I order this, my vendor always wants me to order at least 3. So if Counterpoint were going to suggest 2 originally for this item, but your vendor minimum is 3, then Counterpoint will suggest you order 3. The same with vendor multiples. Don't know a lot of people that use them, but they're handy in this respect. Every time I order this item, I have to order in multiples of 2s, like 2, 4, 6, or 3s, 3, 6, 9. So what this is saying here is when Counterpoint is suggesting what to order, if this or some item has multiples of 3, but only 2 were suggested. So do I want to increase it to the next multiple of 3, decrease it to the next multiple of 0, or if you're using quantity decimals, round it to the nearest multiple? But again, I don't have a lot of people using these two. Okay, so that's your reorder points. The one I like the best is replenishment. And watch how much this screen changes. So I'm going to choose replenishment, which is just fancy for tell me what I should order based on sales. And make sure you suggest a quantity. So if I come down here to the bottom half of the page, analyze my sales from the beginning of the year till today. Now that's really kind of a large date range, which I did on purpose just to get some information. Yours probably won't be that long. It can be any date range as long as it's in the past. So maybe you're getting ready to order for your holiday season. You can put in last year's holiday date ranges to have Counterpoint suggest to you how much you should order based on sales in holiday season 2022. The history factor is set to a 1-to-1 ratio. If I sold 5 in that date range, tell me to order 5. If I sold 10 in that date range, tell me to order 10. But maybe I want Counterpoint to suggest 20% more. So if I put 1.2 here, I'm telling Counterpoint, tell me what I should buy based on sales in that date range, but suggest 20% more than you normally would. Now, maybe I'm trending down or business is a little slow. I can't put a negative here. Counterpoint gets mad. So you have to put something that's less than the whole of 1. Like if I put 0.9 in here, that means suggest 10% less. Or 0.8, suggest 20% less. Okay, so now when I go to select items, in silly, so you can see through my column designer, I added quantity available, quantity on hand. I also added a quantity sold column. Now this is a little tricky because it's not obvious in your column designer. So if I go into the column designer, in the hidden columns, you just want to find the word quantity. And you might, well, what does that mean? It just says quantity, it doesn't say anything else, but it'll be here in this list. And so you'll add it to the visible columns and it'll still just say quantity, but you want it to be a little more intuitive. So if you go to column options and you highlight that word quantity, you can come up here and add the word sold, because that's really what the quantity column means. It means quantity sold. Now, because I'm running this for replenishment from the beginning of the year till today, quantity sold represents everything sold in that date range for these items. Now, Counterpoint's already making a suggestion down here in the quantity field, so I just go and check what I want, or I can select all and unselect what I don't want. I can also change the quantity if I like. That's replenishment. And again, if I want Counterpoint to take into account any unposted purchase request, open POs, vendor minimums, vendor multiples, and current quantity on hand, it can do all of that. Now, if I go to select items, I'm not going to have anything. So I've got a ton of POs that are open. Something I want to talk about with that quantity sold column, it's only useful if you're doing replenishment ordering or days of supply, because you have a date range to filter by. If you're ordering to none or maximum, when you go to select items, quantity sold means from the dawn of time, because there is no date range. So this column is only useful for replenishment and days of supply, not maximum, not none. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to choose days of supply. So this is just like replenishment with an added kick. Again, I'm going to make a, set order to suggest quantity. So you get this extra field down here. And so basically you've said in this particular filter, tell me what I should order from Adams based on my sales year to date with a 1-to-1 ratio, but suggest enough to keep me supplied for X amount of days, 10, 22, whatever you like. Okay, so, and again, I'm not going to get anything because, yeah. This is what you get when you really don't have anything, or when Counterpoint doesn't have anything to suggest. So that's the cool Add Items button. You can bulk add, you can have Counterpoint suggest to you based on min-max, replenishment, days of supply. Very, very nice feature. Purchasing advice, something that I really like, even just for the reporting value, is going to look a lot like Add Items with a few extra boxes. So if I go to purchasing advice, my choices are up here. It's the same choices that I have in Add Items. Replenishment, maximum days of supply. I'm going to choose replenishment. But I can order for all my stores or just a location group. You know, that's just a grouping of stores. I've got 2 location groups, one with all my locations and one with just 2. Or a single location. Now, this will not generate a multi-store purchase request. It'll generate a purchase request at the vendor and location level. So a single store drop ship per vendor. Down here, there's 2 lines. Vendor primary, meaning only look at, my primary vendor for items. Or here's a cool one, the lowest cost vendor. Because you might get some items from 2 different vendors. And maybe you want Counterpoint to suggest a lower cost vendor. And then for those of you that use alternate units, I sell by the each, the 6-pack, the case, you could tell Counterpoint, well, rather than, suggesting I order by my stocking unit, which is usually an each, I want to order by the vendor preferred purchasing unit of 6-pack or case. And I'm just going to set these back to where they were so I get some information. Now, just like in Add Items, you can have Counterpoint take into account purchasing documents, your minimums, your multiples, your current on hand. I'm going to check these so we actually get something. Put in your date range. Let's go from the beginning of the year to today. Now I'm going to go to preview and show you this report. It's a really great report. And I'm just going to scroll down a little bit so there's not so much noise. So let's focus here on this item 1010. So again, one of the very few reports in Counterpoint that shows you all of these values. It's showing you the average unit cost, the last cost, the unit retail. Is this item on an open PO? Is it on an open purchase request? Quantity on order means customer orders with you. Orders, back orders, special orders. So I don't have anything owed to a customer. Look, I can also see my min. I can see my max. I can see my current quantity on hand. I can see what I sold in that date range and what Counterpoint says I should order. I sold 1, Counterpoint says order 1. I sold 5, Counterpoint says order 5. Now I'm going to go to the last page. It's a 5-page report with 31 items in it. That's fine. And I'm going to do something really cool next. Okay, I'm super happy with that report. It is a report, so I can't make any changes. So if Counterpoint suggested 5 and I say, I really need 50, I can't make the change on the report, but I can make it later. So I'm just going to click on Generate, and you get a pop-up where you can put a number here, where you can auto-assign it. Click OK. Now, what this message is saying is, I detect you have some unposted purchase request. So if there's any unposted purchase request for a vendor that's on this report, I'm going to merge those items onto the existing purchase request. Some people like this, some people don't. So if you don't want Counterpoint merging, go clean up your purchase request first. But I'm going to say yes. Okay. So in the blink of an eye, we just built 6 purchase requests, and Counterpoint did merge an item onto one existing purchase request. But then look, you got a warning down here. 2 lines were skipped. So I sold an item in that date range that was not attached to a vendor. So therefore, Counterpoint doesn't know what to do with it, and it's not going to build a purchase request for those items. And then it asks you if you want to see the report again. I'm just going to say no. And I don't need to see the edit list. So now Counterpoint generated those documents in an unposted state. So I'm going to come here to this grid. And you can see everything that it generated today right here. Now, let's say you're playing around. Now, I've done this actually. I've been working with a client. We go to purchasing advice. We generate purchase requests and accidentally generate like 89 of them. Don't worry. Remember, purchasing has no effect on your inventory. So if you generate a bunch of purchase requests because you were playing around and you want to just get rid of them, in your table view, hold down your shift key, down arrow, and you can bulk delete the unwanted documents by clicking on this X up here. And away they go. Next, I want to talk about multi-store. One document ordering from multiple stores. If you're going to do the type of multi-store ordering, where everything is going to ship to a CDC, a central distribution center first, and then distribute from there, there's a purchasing control that you need to make a decision on. So I'm just going to go to my main menu, set up purchasing control. So when you have an allocated merged PO and you receive against it, when the receiving is posted, what kind of transfers do you want Counterpoint to auto-generate? A transfer out or a quick transfer? I'm a bigger fan of transfer outs because you can get multiple items on one, but that's up to you. But do make that decision, because if you leave it at quick transfer and you've got 50 items on a receiving, you're going to get 50 quick transfers. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I'm just going to go back to purchase request enter. And I just give this a number. On the ship to tab, I'm going to decide if I want to do a multi-store document by checking this. That means I'm going to order from more than one store. It defaults to separate, meaning there will be a PO for each store that I'm ordering for, and the merchandise will ship directly from the vendor to that store. If you use allocated, whether it's separate or merged, you have to have a location group. So I have one here just for my main and my east. I'll show you what it looks like. So I just called it location 2, and it has my east location and my main location. Or if I go to this one, my region 1, this has my main and my storage. I'm going to go ahead and order for main and east. Now, when I go to lines, and I'm going to demonstrate this just through the item lookup, but it's going to behave the same in add items. If I go to the item lookup, and I'm just going to order this mini backpack again. Okay, again, I get the, it's discontinued, but I can still order it. Okay, so here I decide how many I want the vendor to ship to my east. I want them to ship 5, and I want them to ship 6 to my main. And I'm going to click on OK. You can add as many items as you like. When I'm done and I post, I want to show you what the POs look like. I'm going to post. I'm going to look at the form, and forms actually. Okay, so here's a PO. Notice how it has a PO number and a -1. So this is the PO that's coming from the vendor to my East store with 5. And if I come up here to my black arrows, here's my PO number with an 02 suffix now, going from Adams to my main store for a quantity of 6, allocated separate. Now let's do an allocated merged. So again, I'm just going to give this a number, the vendor, come to ship 2. This time I'm going to choose allocated merged, meaning everything I order for both of these stores is all going to go to the main first. And the main is going to receive them all in. And at the end of the day, Counterpoint's going to generate transfer outs for the items I ordered for East. So I'm going to come back to lines, and I'm just going to choose that same item. Okay, again, it's discontinued. And so I want East to get 6, but I want the main to keep 2, just as kind of a backstock. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go ahead and post. And I'm going to show you what the PO looks like. This is what the vendor is going to see. Okay, so you can see it's one PO where you're ordering a total of 8, but here's your distribution. East is going to get 6, main is going to keep 2. So I'm just going to exit from here. Now I'm going to receive against that allocated merged PO, because remember, it all shipped to the main. So I'm just going to go to auto assign and get a list of all my open POs. And then I added this column called allocated so I could spot my allocated POs. And here's the one that I just created. So I'm going to click OK. And I usually leave this box alone. But now I'm going to come down here to lines, and you can see a total of 8 are being received in. If I come down here to this little check mark, you can see 6 are destined for the East, and the main is going to keep 2. So now I'm just going to post. And yes, I'm sure. Now, what you didn't see is at the moment of posting, Counterpoint generated a transfer out for the East for 6 units in an unposted state. So which is good. So because you might change your mind about how many you want the East to get. So if I go back to inventory and transfers and transfer out, enter, main to East, there's a note here that this transfer was generated from a receiver that was received against a particular PO. Oh, and right there. And here's the 6 units that I want to send to East. So at this point, I might say, well, you know what? I really only want to send 4. You can change it. Or I really want to send all 8. You can change it. But don't forget when you're done to post, and then don't forget to have the destination store do the corresponding transfer in. I see a lot of people, that's kind of a pitfall with transfers. Everyone's good about doing the transfer out and posting the transfer out, but then the destination store gets all excited about the merchandise. They put it on the floor and they never do the transfer in. Okay, so that's your purchasing tips and tricks. Let's go back to PowerPoint. Oh, let's see. Let's go from current slide. All right, so hopefully you learned about how to use the add items feature, which is a nice time-saving feature. Or another really great time-saving feature is the purchasing advice report. Or even if you don't generate your purchasing documents from that report, it's just a great report. And then if you're more than one store, now you know how to create a multi-store document, whether you're going to have items shipped directly from the vendor to the stores, or everything's going to ship to one place and distribute later. Okay, so how do we do? Love your feedback, love your suggestions. When you get the link to your recording on Friday, there will be a survey. It's, a happy face, sad face type of affair. I appreciate you filling out the survey. If you want to fill out the survey today, you can go directly to our website, www.cksystem.com/training bytes survey. If you want to get training tailored to your business, your data, because we use a golf store in these webinars. Maybe you don't have a golf store. Call me at extension 3 or email training@cksystem.com. Happy to schedule an appointment with you. And again, we would work on your data, which would have more real life examples for you. Something new that we introduced this year is something called the C&K Quarterly. So that's a live meeting, live webinar every quarter. It falls on June 28th at 1 o'clock this quarter. We're going to talk about retail operations, Counterpoint product updates, and also web connector enhancements. So make sure you sign up. The email started going out this week. Again, free to attend. We record the session. We'll send you a copy of the recording that you can share with everyone in your organization. So I'm going to stay up to date on Counterpoint and C&K. Next month, July the 12th. Now it's coming a little bit later next month because July 4th falls on that first Wednesday or within that week. But just some general Counterpoint tips and tricks, which you may have learned like on day one training, but now it's been 3 or 4 years. So we'll talk about some shortcuts and time savers. We'll talk about fixing quick reports. You know, when you preview a report in the lookup, the columns are all off center. I'll show you how to fix that. We'll talk a little bit about the work center, you know, how to audit for unposted documents and more. There'll be a lot of information. So make sure you sign up July the 12th, again, 10 and 1, completely free. And with that, I shall take questions.
There was one in chat because they were having trouble with Q&A.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of a limitation. What was the question? Do you know?
When you copy from an old PO when creating a new one, does it pull price from last cost in the item table or the unit cost in the vendor items table?
That's a really good question. Technically, when you pull any item to a purchase request, it is looking at vendor cost, unless for whatever reason the vendor cost field is blank, then it'll pull from last cost. Very good question. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. They look at last cost and think that that's really what's suggested on a purchasing document, but it's actually the vendor cost that's being suggested, which typically matches the last cost. But that's where Counterpoint's getting it from. Okay, did we have any other questions, Marty?
I didn't see any, but it's not too late for people to jump in.
Yeah, exactly.
No more questions? It's because you did an excellent job, Gina.
Yeah. I'll let your boss know that you're just great. I always appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, well, if anyone doesn't have any questions, thanks a lot for attending. Appreciate your time. Be on the lookout for the recording on Friday. And hopefully I see you at the C&K Quarterly on the 28th and at the next Training Bytes on July the 12th. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.